Hey,
2 minutes
we
until
have two
showtime.
more minutes to go. So while we wait and others to join, we fool around a little bit, play around with my microphone and all that stuff. And me and the microphone, we never play in it. The microphone always wins, no matter what I do. No matter what I do, the microphone wins. Hey, everybody, good morning. Thanks so much for joining. I hope you are all going to be part of our conversation this morning, and I am so very grateful. So very grateful. So we're waiting to be joined on other platforms. We have just about a minute and a half before we actually segue into being joined on other platforms. I want to say a special thank you to uh, my YouTube viewer who is always viewing. Thank you so much for always being so faithful and for always being a part of our show. I'm simply grateful
One
that you
minute
take the
until
time to
showtime.
be part of this. So thank you so much. We're talking about Alabama's prisons this morning and why are prison inmates dying in Alabama. Quite the stuff. I must admit it. Hey, Raven, I must admit I was chilled to the core when I read this one. It was not good. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. And as soon as we are joined by other platforms, it's amazing to me how you just start sniffling just before you go on and so on. It's quite the thing, isn't it? Isn't it? So we're about to start counting down. And you'd be surprised in radio, right? I learned to appreciate a minute. I didn't realize how long a minute was until I went on radio. You know, when they say 30 seconds to go live,
Your show will
it's
go
like,
live in 5
listen
seconds.
to this.
4, 3, 2, 1.
And we're live. Thank you so much, everybody. Welcome to Down to Earth with Harriet Kimmick, the show in which we talk about the issues that matter. And I'm so very grateful that you've taken time out to be with us this morning and to be a part of our show. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your inputs and I value your service. I value your time. And I thank you so much for being a part of our show. There are so many other ways that you could spend your morning and spend your time. And I'm deeply grateful that you choose to spend the time with us. Thank you so very much. Um, I wanted to do a little book housekeeping prior to seguing into our show. I wanted to make sure that most of you by now know that our show, Down to Earth, is podcasted on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And I encourage you, after this show ends, after this live feed ends, that you go to those platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, and so many other podcast platforms, and make sure that you download and subscribe so we kind of track it to see what people are listening to so that we know what topics that you're interested in. So thank you so much for your continued support. So today on our show, we're going to talk about why are prison inmates dying in Alabama. And it's alarming because what we discovered was that prison inmates in Alabama are dying at a rate of 9 times the national average. And because it is so alarming, we had to figure out why. So we did some digging around and found a Department of Justice report that specifically gives the specific reasons why. You got to understand the DOJ did a study on Alabama prisons. That's damning already. But what they said in essence was even worse. And it makes you wonder about the prison industrial complex. And it makes you wonder about this whole system of prison for profit, right? We blame Bill Clinton for being the architect of mass incarceration, right? But in 2010, a Democratic president actually signed a bill into place that reduced sentencing on stuff like crack cocaine. Now, what the DOJ found is that black and whites use and sell drugs at equally the same rate. So when you look at why is one segment of the population targeted for being locked up more than the other, especially when it comes to drug use. You've got to think that there must be some other factor that contributes to this. And we all know what it is. It's the R word, racism, right? It is what it is, right? So Alabama, we don't need to ask where Alabama is. It's a deep state. It's a red state. It's located in the South. And traditionally, the South has more issues than other states in the North. Why? It goes back over 150 years, 170 years, and just seemingly these states refuse to conform. They refuse to change. And that's a note to all of us, in our refusal to change and to move with the times, what we find is that we hurt our people. Now, I'm going to give you some statistics and I'm going to share some information with you that I found equally alarming. And I don't know, I've been tweeting about this all morning. I hope somebody from Alabama finally gets it, but I don't think they do, because if the DOJ found that they didn't get it, they're definitely not going to get it from you and I, if you know what I mean, right? So here's some things that, and I'm going to read it to you because I found this to be very alarming. I've often said that I don't think anybody should go to jail for drug abuse. I think that's a mental health issue. If you are going to use drugs because you can't cope with the issues of your life, that's a mental health issue. I don't care what color you are, right? I don't think anybody should go to jail for drug abuse. Another reason for why Alabama has so many people in prison, and it's not just in Alabama, it's where else? It's everywhere in the country. When they took mental health and psychiatric facilities out of the budget, guess what? Police and the police stations and the lockups became a sort of warehouse for people who have mental health issues. So people can't handle when people are not conforming, or their mental health issues become active or activated. They call the police. What is the police going to do? There's no hospital for the police to take them to, so they end up being warehoused. So sometimes they have what we call repeat offenders. They just show up. Recently, I read a report here in Detroit about a group of police officers who have a regular beat. Two of them, they have a regular beat. Well, on their regular beat are some regular offenders, regular people who act out with mental health. And the police officer said after a while, he got it. He recognized that these people were mental. So when they were called and they showed up, they'll just say, "Oh, okay. So we're just going to take you down to the hospital. They're going to give you some meds, and then you deal with it." Okay, okay, officer. But it points to a very alarming situation in the country. We are leaving the police, who are not supposed to be handling mental health. They should be handling crime, not mental health. But we leave the police to handle mental health. People become aggressive because they don't know how to interpret what is going on around them. And then they end up being locked up because at that point it becomes you broke the law. So a lot of people are being incarcerated for mental health and for stupid things like drug use. Think about that. Why should you lock anybody up for drug use? So you lock people up and they are locked away. They become frustrated and angry at themselves, perhaps, but also angry at the system that warehouses them and locks them up for something like drug use. So, when you sit down in jail, you start thinking and you're like, really? For some drug? For some weed? Some coke? Right? You rub them off their life. And now, if they even come out of jail, they don't have any options. They can't rent a house, can't rent an apartment, can't get a car loan, can't get a house loan. Imagine that. Can't get a job. And now, what do you do with all these people? So here's some alarming statistics about Alabama. And I'm just going to read it to you. And feel free to join in. Alabama runs the most violent prison system in America. Inmates are killed at 9 times the national rate. In 2019, 13 people were killed inside Alabama's prison. So I'm just going to stop there. You go to prison, people are sent to prison, and people are being killed in prison at a rate of 9 times the national average. 13 people, 2019 is not over yet, and already 13 people in Alabama's prisons have been killed. Why? That shouldn't happen, right? That shouldn't be. That points to some sort of deficiency in our system, right? Uh, the national rate is 7 per 100,000. That means for every 100,000 inmates, 7 people are killed. But Alabama's rate is 62 per 100,000. Why? There are some factors to consider. Hold on. Suicides are high. We all know that suicides happen in prisons. It's underreported because prisons do not want, and Department of Corrections do not want to disclose it because it is an alarming statistic. But family members who are still hurting and who are traumatized will tell you that a number of people who go to prisons kill themselves. I heard from earlier this year on our show. The show is still on YouTube. You can go view it. I had a former inmate on my show who first brought it to my attention that when people are leaving prison, a lot of them don't have anywhere to go because family members don't want them because they have to use an address so that they can be paroled to that address and so on, right? And so when people don't have anywhere to go, they kill themselves before. Some people kill themselves while they're in prison because they're obviously frustrated, dissatisfied with their lives. Suicides are high in prisons. That's an underreported, not talked about fact, right? Corrections officers, listen to this. This is in Alabama. Corrections officers have been charged with murder. I kid you not. I'm reading this from the DOJ report. Murder, extortion, and sexual assault. Are you all hearing this? If that does not chill you, I don't know what does. I can't even hear you guys. I was literally reading this and I was chilled reading it because this is happening in prison. And this is from the DOJ. The DOJ just concluded a 2-year study. The Department of Justice just concluded a 2-year study. And it says this. It concludes that conditions in Alabama's prisons violate the 8th Amendment. I, like you, was speechless. They also said that it has the highest homicide rate. Oh, God. And they also said that the conditions are cruel, violent, and so pervasive that it is unbelievable. Somebody else used a different expletive to describe it. So why are Alabama's prisons so violent? Well, let's look at the facts. Who is Alabama? Alabama has overcrowding in the prisons, right? They have a lack of staffing. Of course, they participate in the prison for profit and the prison industrial complex. And I know most of you are just going to jump and be happy. Well, if you do something wrong, you should go to prison. Well, next time you're driving down the street with some weed, right? And you feel like you're a free man, a free woman, and you get pulled over for some weed that exceeds the limit that makes you commit a felony, then you will find out how inequitable it is. I used to think that going to prison, you had to do something egregiously bad until I realized that sometimes we criminalize people overtly or intentionally. That people get pulled over for whatever issues that they get pulled over for, and they become criminalized after 3 times being pulled over. It leads to over criminalization really quickly. So bench warrants I'm not talking about people who are silly. You are issued a date to appear in court and you don't go to court. I don't understand what that is about. So they write you a letter You're supposed to go to court and you don't show up at court. Well, they're going to send out a bench warrant for your arrest. So something that started out as a misdemeanor, a minor traffic violation, suddenly becomes a criminal issue. So sometimes the address on people's driver's licenses is not where they actually live, and people sometimes don't think about stuff like that. You move, you change your go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and change your address. Some people don't do that. Some people move frequently, so they don't change their address as often as they move. So the address on their driver's license is where the mail is going to go to, and when they don't get the mail, guess what? They don't show up in court. A bench warrant is issued for their arrest. So they're driving, their driver's license is suspended now, right? So they're driving, they don't know it, they get pulled over again. Then all of a sudden they find out their driver's license is suspended and they are criminalized. Do you see how quickly that escalates? It goes very quickly. But this happens more frequently for people of color, for black and brown people, more than white people just seem to get dismissed. Oh, okay, well, just make sure you go take care of this, and it's done, right? So why is Alabama so bad? Well, here's some facts about Alabama, right? Uh, Alabama has the seventh highest poverty rate in the country. It ranks 50th in terms of education, 46th in terms of healthcare, and 45th in terms of opportunity. Those are the facts. It has the seventh highest poverty rate. It ranks 50th in terms of education. That means they don't do a good job of educating the people there. Nobody should go to prison and never be and didn't commit a murder, right? I don't know. Some people hold up people and touch people inappropriately and stuff, right? So there are some considerations there, right? It's 46th in terms of healthcare, the delivery of healthcare, 45th in terms of opportunity for Alabamans. So in order to fix why inmates are dying in Alabama, what do we need to do? We need to fix Alabama. If Alabama has the seventh highest poverty rate, we already know which other states have number one: Louisiana, Mississippi. They consistently rank high, right? And it's 50th in terms of education. Alabama needs fixing. Alabama, my friends, need fixing. Now, I'm not going to talk about the other stuff. I love Bama football. I watch college football. I love Crimson Tide. I've been watching that for years and years and years. But there's a severe disparity there. If the people can't get basic education, can't finish high school, so they can at least get a job, then we're going to have some issues. I keep saying that violence, a big factor in violence is poverty. And when violence takes place, it reduces people to poverty. A lot of these folks who are also going to prison are people who have committed domestic violence, right? So they're in prison because of violence, right? But at the same time, the poverty also is a contributing factor, because if you're going to rank 50th in education, 46th in healthcare, and 47th in terms of opportunity, seems to me that people have already given up. So if you're born in Alabama, you just say, well, there's no hope for me, because when you look around you, everybody is in the same boat. This is a big problem. And if we don't talk about it and we don't turn our national gaze on it, because right now the national gaze seems to be on impeachment. That's where the media wants us to look, right? So because it's drama, they want ratings and stuff. But in the meantime, there are people in Alabama prisons who probably should not be in prison. There are people who have mental health issues. There are people who probably were in the wrong place at the wrong time. There are people who probably was just smoking weed or snorting cocaine. Those people I keep saying this. Why are we incarcerating people for using drugs? You want to mess your life up. You have a mental health problem, right? So, and I see this sometimes. Some of us, we need to be a little bit more culpable. Yeah? Don't drive with weed in your car. You might get pulled over. Don't go solicit weed. I've recently, a few days ago, I was on the phone with someone, and I was just like, don't use drugs. And why get behind the wheel of a car if you're drinking? I don't get that. Do you see what I'm saying? But that's me, right? But what about the people who do that? Some of these folks are, some people are in jail because they can't make bail. So the cash bail system is also a contributor to people's incarceration. So you get pulled over some misdemeanor stuff. They say, all right, you're going to go down to jail, right? And in order to get out, you have to post bail, but you're too poor to be able to post bail. So you can't post bail. So you end up rotting in jail. So you get frustrated and you want to get out, but you don't have the money to get out and you're angry. Some of the stuff that I read in this report was mind blowing, where people were being stabbed. Like last year in Alabama, in a prison in Alabama, people watched as inmates watched as other inmates stabbed someone and the guards disappeared. They also held another inmate at gunpoint to perform oral sex. Are you listening to me? Do you really think when those people come out of prison that those are some folks who are going to be rehabilitated? Those are going to be some angry people, right? We have to stop this prison industrial complex where we are mass incarcerating people for simple stuff. Some of these, we got to get back to the stage where we have psychiatric care. Some people do need psychiatric care. We need to get back to the stage. Stop relying on the police to become the mental health doctors and facilitators. Their job is to fight crime. That's all they're trained. So if they come and your loved one who is acting out, because they didn't get their meds or they don't want to take their meds, right? What are they going to do? They're going to lock them up because that's all they can do, right? So they have. I was watching a 60 Minutes episode. I think it was Sunday night or last week, right? And they were talking about the red flag law. Remember that? And when they interviewed the sheriffs, he said 80% of the people in his prison have mental health issues, are there because of mental health. That's an alarming number. I dare say that a lot of the folks who end up in prison in Alabama are perhaps people who have mental health issues. And like I've been saying all along, if you're taking drugs, you have some issues. Why would you take something that's not good for you that is likely to land you in jail? You must not be able to think. You must not be thinking this thing through, right? Because if you're aware and alert, you recognize that doing this is going to become a problem for you later on, right? And it's not to say some people start, most people who start taking, they say, well, I'm in control of it or I can handle it, right? And it's, why are you saying I use drugs? I don't really use drugs. I just use it occasionally when I just want to pet myself up. That's usually the defense. They become very defensive because they're aware that they're impaired, that their actions are impaired because they're sort of, in another world is what I call it, right? But those are people who need a different kind of assistance. Prison is perhaps not the place for them, right? They need to be in a mental health facility because invariably, by the time they emerge from prison, they're so damaged mentally and so traumatized and have so many PTSD issues, they end up without a job, they can't work, and they end up in homeless shelters and they end up being homeless. Do you see what we have created? It just goes round and round and round and round. Now, when you look at Alabama and you think about it being the 50th state in terms of education, that's easy to fix, isn't it? That's easy to fix. What does that require? Putting money in schools, making sure that you can feed the poor children who come into school, right? Making sure that you provide bus systems, transportation for kids to get to school, pay the darn teachers for crying out loud, pay the people who are going to teach, repair the roof, provide technology in the schools, make it easy for kids to want to come to school, right? Provide incentives, give them free lunch. Duh, right? So if you start by fixing the problem needs to be fixed with education. The other problem is healthcare. Why are these poorer states not wanting their citizens to have access to healthcare? That's a big problem because if you take Medicaid out of it and you have a family member you can't afford to go to the doctor because you don't get jobs that give you health benefits, right? You get jobs, not careers. So jobs that pay you minimum wage at 20 hours a week, you're not getting any health benefit. So then you take state Medicaid out of it because according to you, you don't want to create a welfare system where every other damn country in the world provides health care for their citizens, but we're looking at it like we don't want to create a welfare state. Are you kidding me? Like, seriously, that is the silliest argument I've ever heard. So, people who are bipolar, right? People who need medication to make them function, they can't access it. So, you call them loony? Well, yeah, because you took the money out, but you're having a good time. Do you see what I'm saying? Either we hate people. I think we've just, let's just call it what it is. We hate people. We hate people. We don't like people because we look at people and we're like, you're a problem. You probably shouldn't, you don't mean anything. You're valueless. We hate people. That is why, as politicians treat people indiscriminately because they hate people. It is what it is. What else can I see when I look at statistics that Alabama is the 50th in education in the country, 46th in terms of healthcare, and 47th in terms of providing opportunity to its residents? What else am I going to say but that the people who run the systems there hate people? You mean to tell me that you would rather take the money out of schools and let people grow up without an education, and you will stop state Medicaid, but at the same time, listen, you want to stop Medicaid because it just makes you sound so fiscally prudent. No, you are a hater of human beings, right? And what it does, you do not correspondingly provide jobs that fill the gap. It's what we call gaps in services. So the jobs that people are working are minimum wage jobs for 15 hours a week, 10 hours a week. How are they going to pay rent and access health care to treat their mental health condition? Do you see where I'm coming from? Food for thought. So while most of us get on our sandbox and we love to, down on people, and we love to say, well, this happens to them because it happens to those people, you forget the underlying reason. Because we don't think about people. People don't matter. This is why slavery is a thing today. A few years ago, 50, 60 years ago, most of us had kind of, people were a little bit kinder. Oh, well, let's think of the good of all. Despite racism and colorism, today people are like, I don't care. We are so mean. We dog people down. We look down on people. We think we're better than other human beings. And even and I'm not talking about private individuals who are running their corporations for profit. I'm talking about people who are elected officials. It's the government of Alabama, the state government. That's who is responsible for the outcomes that we're reading about. It's not the private corporations. It's the politicians. It's the politicians who have to say, you are not coming into my state to provide jobs for my people and pay them less than minimum wage and do not pay them a living wage and give them 20 hours a week. That's the job of the politician. We have a mayor here in Detroit, and he's filled with corruption scandal right now. I'm not a happy camper with him. But when he was restructuring Detroit, he asked the other companies, I'll give you incentives to operate, but you got to give jobs to people. You have to pay them a living wage, and they have to work 40 hours per week. You know what that does? If you think about it, he's not being magnanimous. He's just thinking how it's going to what? Say it loud. Decrease the crime rate. So even if he weren't a lover of people, he was thinking as a statistician and as an urban planner, it's going to decrease the crime rate. And it's going to make neighborhoods thrive. And if neighborhoods thrive, people feel better. They're not going to want to commit crime. Raven, do you see what I'm saying? I know you're getting it. I know it's hitting. And I know you're shaking your head like, wow, I never thought of it like that. Yeah. So when some of us talk about these things, oftentimes we're viewed as if we're talking about it from a perspective of underness. Well, you're saying that because you're the underclass. You're saying that because you're a minority. You're saying that because you feel disenfranchised. You got to look at the big picture. When I was reading this report, as chilling as it was, this is the Trump administration's Department of Justice. So this is not something that you can concoct and say this came from a previous administration. No, this is under the current administration. And they are appalled at the prison system in Alabama. They're like cruel and violent conditions exist that, listen, the DOJ says it violates the Eighth Amendment. I feel like crying. Can you imagine a prison inmate in Alabama? Can you imagine being a prison inmate in Alabama right now? How would you feel? You see violence all around you. One of the things that contributes to it is overcrowding. There are not enough staff. But correspondingly, a lot of the corrections workers have been tried for abuses related to prisoners, such as murder, extortion, and sexual assault. Nah, just no. Just no. Just no. Something is up. This got to be fixed. This is just one. In the report, I read another report that said the 5 whitest states in the country, Wyoming, Montana, Vermont, right? That those states, there are no statistics on people being locked up. Do you see what I'm saying? I too was chilled. We have an old system that continues to disenfranchise people, that continues to make people and we haven't done anything significant about it. So when you're on Twitter and whatever social media platforms and you hear people talk about the prison industrial complex and prison for profit, we tend to look at people and say, well, you're part of the system. You're part of the people who are bad. And most of us, when you see see these abuses happen, you say, well, if they didn't do anything, they wouldn't be caught up in it. That's not necessarily true. You could just be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I pray such a thing never happens to me nor my children. But these things do happen to people. You could just be driving down the street. You pull into the gas station. And suddenly something starts happening and they show up and you're there and they just assume you're part of it. You lose your darn freedom over stuff that don't even have anything to do with you. And this is not talking about people who make mistakes, because, we like to think we give people a second chance, right? But these are some of the things that when you look at what people are going to jail, if people don't have education, for instance, how do you think they're going to earn a living? Don't you think that they'll more easily resort to crime? Think about that. Seriously? Urban planners and statisticians know this. Social scientists know this. Wherever there is a lack of opportunity, people are going to what? Create opportunities, which invariably lead to crime. So as long as we continue to make to not invest in the things that we should invest in. And frankly, I don't know what Alabama does with their money. I don't know. But one thing is very clear is that if they're 50th in education, they're not investing in education. They don't see providing education as something. I mean, even here in Michigan, we ran into a problem like that where a Detroit public school student took the school district to court because after he graduated, he didn't even graduate. He found that the school system did not prepare him, they didn't teach him reading and writing. And the Michigan Supreme Court said, well, an education is not a constitutional right. And it was backed by the outgoing governor, Rick Snyder, the man who created Flint. Yeah, even Republicans don't like him. Like, where are these people coming from who are emerging and just running for political office and they hate people like this? How are we voting for people who hate others and who hate people? I would like to think that we look at the system and say, okay, there are some inequities in the system, but let us work to minimize them. Instead, we're electing people who hate people. How did he become governor of Michigan? He was so distant. This is the guy who said he was saving money by running lead-filled water and dirty water through Flint, even when General Motors said, we're not using that water to even fix our cars, much less. This dude was telling his staff, go out and buy bottled water. But he didn't care that the people who lived in Flint were going to suffer from it. How is he not? Why? He should be facing something for that. And like I said, even people in his own party don't like that. This is the same guy. And it's people like that who have control of public policy. And that's why people are continuing to suffer. And that's why people are going to prisons at a rate and they're dying in prisons. Alabama should be ashamed. Alabama needs to be ashamed. Alabama needs to be fixed. And I get that people down there probably are so afraid of the system, they're not going to speak out. Because today, when you speak out, you're vilified, you're ostracized. People come looking for you and all kinds of foolishness when you speak out against stuff like this. But how am I supposed to sit back and feel good about people going to prison? First of all, people with mental health issues. Even the sheriffs are having issues with it. The sheriffs in Colorado were having issues with that. And I'm sitting there listening to them and I'm like, you got a point. I'm like, you do have a point. Why should you be responsible for taking care of my mentally ill family member? The poorest states in the country remove state Medicaid. So you can't even take care of your mentally ill family member. Why? And when you look at it disproportionately, I look at some of these people who are politicians and I'm like, you're not even better than the people you're governing. Or you want to be. And yet this continues over and over again. I'm going to post the link to this report. You need to read it for yourselves because maybe you think I'm hyperventilating this. You know what I mean? And you probably think I'm making this stuff up, but I'm reading you the facts from the DOJ's report. It got to me, my friends, when the DOJ said that it was a cruel, that violence in the Alabama prison system is cruel and pervasive. The Department of Justice. And to the extent where the DOJ concludes that those conditions violate the Eighth Amendment. So it goes without saying that the prison population in Alabama is 56% Black. Black people in Alabama are 26% of the population, yet the prison population of Alabama is 56% Black. It lends credence to the argument that black and brown people suffer disproportionately. Oh, Raven, thank you, sweetie. And my friends, I'm asking for your help. Please, I'm asking for your help. Please, you got to help us. I feel like crying because I cannot imagine what it must be like to find yourself incapable of helping yourself. You can't even get an education. So if you can't get an education, you can't get out of the downward spiral. You can't get out of the generational poverty. So your likely outcome is going to be prison. Hello. Hello. I need your help. I need you to talk about this. I need you to share this podcast. I need you to talk about it, and I need you to tell others. My friends, we can't just ignore this stuff. Yesterday, I talked about homeless children in Michigan. Homeless children, 36,000 people. And under federal law, it says that if you don't have adequate nighttime sleeping, regular adequate nighttime sleeping arrangements, you're homeless. Here in Michigan, they're doing a concerted effort, especially here in Southeast Michigan. I'm part of the Homeless Coalition, and they're doing a concerted effort. They're getting money from the government to set up places and spaces where people can get off the streets. We got to be more compassionate. They're human beings just like you and I. This is not the age of the Industrial Revolution. We have information. Help. I am asking you for help. I'm asking you to tweet the governor of Alabama and the attorney general of Alabama and say, what on earth is going on? Why are inmates dying at 9 times the rate, the national average? Why is it 62 per 100,000 inmates when the national average is 7 per 100,000? I read this and I was shaken. And you read a lot of stuff, but this one, because I can't understand and believe living without hope, what that would be, right? Yes, Trump started the First Step Act, which dates back to a 2010 law, right? So I think out of that act, a number over 1,000 people got out of jail because they reduced the sentences, so got them out of jail. So now the next step in the Trump administration's effort is to those folks who are coming out of jail now. They're looking at, well, if they went into jail for stuff like drugs, reducing that so that they can get state identification so that they can get jobs. So they're moving forward with that because you recognize that's a problem. You understand? They recognize that that's a problem. And somebody is taking the initiative that we really should do something about it. Alabama is I'm ashamed. I'm so disappointed. I'm disappointed and I'm disgusted and hurt that inmates are killing themselves and that corrections officers are being charged for murder and sexual assault. Don't drive to Alabama. I'm not going. I don't want to be caught up in that. They chill me. The southern states are like a whole other world. Have you been to some of these southern states? It's a whole other world. The disparities and the inequities in income is so startling. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. We gotta change. I need your help. I need your help. I need you to talk about this. And I know if you start talking about it in your own family group, they're going to say, well, what are you, a nigger lover? Why are you talking about this? But we have to look at it from the benefit of, we have to look at it from what is good for all. It's not just what is good for one person, it's what's good for all. We shouldn't be locking up people who are mentally challenged. We should not be locking up people who choose to use drugs. That's your choice. As far as I'm concerned, using drugs, you're taking a choice to ruin your life. So why put them in prison? What is that going to do? How is that going to help them? Prisons should be reserved for the truly heinous crimes. People who like to kill people who like to rape people who like to hurt children, people who like to murder people who like to ride around and rob banks because, hey, that's a job. That's who prison is for. Prison is for those people, what we refer to as criminals. Yeah, they need to go to prison. But people who are smoking weed, driving with some weed in their car, have some substance they're going to put up their nose, right? They've already made a decision to hurt themselves. It sounds to me like they need mental health counseling, right? Right? Thank you. I need your help. I need you to talk about this. So could you do me a favor and share this podcast? Tell others about this. Why it's important that we need to talk about this. We got to fix Alabama. And just like in my state, Michigan, you know, everybody is coming together and saying, hey, we got a problem with homelessness. We got to fix this. Everybody is saying too many people are in prisons. We need to look at that. Black and white alike, everybody is like, we need to look at this. They're looking at what is good for all, right? Let me see what Raven is saying. Raven, you're saying, I have been to home and it's no fun. Nah, no fun. No, nah. So I'm going to post the link to the story. I'd really like you guys to read it. And I'd really like you to, while you're reading it probably is going to do the same thing to you that it did to me. You're going to say, wow, is that right? Wow. Okay. Thank you for listening, for being my guest this morning, and for listening. I am so grateful. This prison, we call it a prison industrial complex because that's what it is. Folks are in prison and they're working at like $7, 7 cents a day, 10 cents a day. That's slavery. That's really what it is about. Years ago, I went to a symposium and they told me that I needed to know about this. And he was telling me that a lot of the chairs that I buy, and the furniture I buy are made by prisoners. And I of course, I dismissed them until he told me. He showed me how. That's why we call it a prison industrial complex. Because if you lock people up for stupid things, then you will have access to their labor. You know that 13th Amendment is not really repealed. It's still there on the books. It still says that you can lock people up if you feel that. You can lock black people up if you feel that they're doing something that that they shouldn't be doing. It's still there. The 13th Amendment. It's still there. Right? No, I have uh I think I'm getting the sniffles. Whenever you see me start it, that means I'm getting the sniffles. So I need to go take medication and the antihistamine that you have to do. I don't even want to. Don't even start talking about it because then I'm gonna have to really see it as a thing, right? And no, I've never used drugs in my life. Um, I've never used drugs in my life, so I've never had to. So no, Raven, I don't use cocaine, and I've never used cocaine. I've never even taken a whiff of weed or something. I don't drink. When I tell you I don't drink and I don't do drugs, I mean that. I've never done that. And why? I never thought it was going to help me. I never thought, with all the problems that I've had and all the life issues I've experienced, I never thought that drugs or alcohol was ever going to be a way to ameliorate them. I never thought so. I thought it would do me more harm than good. And I'm too much of a control freak anyway. I like to be in control. So I'm not going to take anything that's going to make me, lose control of where I am or where I don't. You see what I'm saying? No, I don't. I don't. And that's a separate argument. Why do people take drugs and so on? That's a whole different thing. There could be any number of reasons. A lot of people say they're numbing the pain, or it makes them not think, or they forget about what their issues are. That's how they translate, and that's how they interpret. It's not how I chose. You see what I mean? And I advocate for people not to take drugs, especially children, and I advocate for not to drink and so on, because personally and historically, we just prove that it does not help. It's not going to help you, right? But we got a problem in Alabama. So I'd like you all to tweet and ask them, we got to fix this stuff. So now when you hear people talking about the prison industrial complex and you hear people talking about prison for profits, now you have some sort of a background as to why this happens. Now you understand it. So now when we talk about it, you don't think that people are just getting on a sandbox, or, you know what I mean? You know why, right? Wow. Right? So, as usual, this was a heavy topic, right? Can we breathe? Are you ready? I'd like us to inhale and exhale to release. Come on. Ready? On the count of three. Three, two, one. Release. It was a very heavy topic. I need you to breathe, right? If this message has been a blessing to you, come back and join me on Down to Earth with Harriet Camrick. Make sure that you become part of our podcast family by subscribing to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. And make sure you join our live feed again tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to talk about homelessness in New York. Why are 116,000 children in New York homeless, under 6 years old? We'll talk about that tomorrow. So make sure you become part of our podcast family. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for being part of my experience today. Right? Thanks for so much for participating. My faithful viewer on YouTube, Raven Bishop, everybody. Give her a shout out. She never not participates. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your time on this Wednesday morning on this topic of why Alabama prison inmates are dying. Thank you so much, everybody. For more information, go to my website, theexodusfoundation.com and harrietkamrick.com. You can find me on Google, and you can find me anywhere. I'm an author and speaker, so I write books. Thanks so much, everybody. Be blessed. Bye.